Good evening. When Don announced the topic and he said that we have an expert who's going to give the final word on the subject, he obviously was trying to be funny, but it felt like a lead balloon. I promise you that nobody upon the earth has the final word on the subject, but we can only present a perspective in trust that we're being faithful to Scripture. During the Lenten season, the thought of believers often goes to the events that took place in the so-called Holy Land, and especially as we approach Holy Week, because that's where the great redemptive events that we celebrate have occurred. During our series on Romans that is being conducted by Pastor Hybels, and what a series it is. I think it's a fantastically enriching series. During this series, there have been frequent references to the Jewish people and to Israel, and I wonder if any of you thought of the possible relationship of those references written down almost 2,000 years ago to the present state of Israel, and if so, what could be the implications of this relation? And of course, it's impossible now not to be aware of the conflict that is going on right there with the Palestinian revolt, which has started some 15 weeks ago in the so-called occupied territories against the Jewish military occupants. One is astounded by the intensity of the hatred on both sides. And as we see reports on television, we have to be aware that those reports are restricted. There has been almost one case of killing of Palestinians per day since this has started, since the crisis has begun 2.5 months ago. And yet not once on TV there was shown, because it hasn't been captured by the crews, although there are many crews there, not once was there shown one of those killings. We're shown the breaking of bones and throwing of stones and the shooting of tear gas, but not the real thing. So you can have an idea of how ferocious the encounters must be. But to me, equally astounding is the rift that is taking place among the Jewish people themselves, both overseas and in other places. The rift in terms of their evaluation of the situation and the solutions that might be brought to the situation in order to resolve the crisis in Palestine. Some people advocate the hard line and the iron fist and more repression. But an increasing number of people opt for a solution of negotiation and the exchange of land for peace. This not only among prominent leaders in Israel, but also by a great number of responsible Jewish personalities in this land. One of my students of Jewish background came to me quite dismayed with this explanation. She said, "Until now, I thought that whatever Israel was doing was right, and that it was ordained by God. But I'm in a state of confusion because I'm convinced that what is going on now there cannot be approved of God." So, what is going on? Well, it's all part of a larger problem, and the problem is the fact of the creation of the state of Israel soon after World War II in the land that was called Palestine. In other words, right there we have two peoples fighting over the same land. There is not only a territorial problem that people are contending over, but there is also the fact that the creation of the State of Israel has produced 1.5 million Palestinian Arab refugees who were pushed out of Israel in the desert, in other countries. Most of them are still in their state of refugees in refugee camps. 500,000 of them went over to Lebanon. That was a strong, stable, prosperous country. And you and I know what happened in that country. And that's only one instance of the destabilization that took place with the influx of Jews during the first half of the 20th century in that part of the world. And there is, of course, as an additional fallout, a religious conflict. To a great extent, the resurgence of fanatical fundamentalist Islam, which is threatening world peace globally, is a result of the Palestinian problem. Before the creation of Israel, Islam was dormant. People were happy in that part of the world being what they were. But the influx of Westerners, the creation of this military state in that part of the world, radicalized all of Islam, with the effects that you know and of which we are suffering today, by having hostages, German, French, American hostages held by representatives of those groups. How could such a mess take place? How did it happen? The Jewish view of the situation would go something like this. That land is ours. Remember, it was given to Abraham and his descendants. It's promised to us in our Jewish Bible. We have divine rights to that land. And after Abraham, we owned that land for centuries until 70 AD, when the Romans came, destroyed the land, destroyed everything that was on it, and chased us out. So since then, since 70 AD, indeed, we have been a hopeless people. We have been in other lands, but in those other lands we have remained separate. We have kept our identity as a people, our national identity, our ethnic identity. We have kept our language, we have kept our religion. And because of that separateness, we have suffered. During the Middle Ages, there were widespread persecutions against us Jews. In the 19th century in Russia, there were atrocious pogroms, as they were called, which were attempts to exterminate the Jews living in that land. And of course, in the 20th century, that was that horrendous Nazi Holocaust, where millions and millions of Jews lost their lives or suffered untold pain. As the aftermath of the turmoil of World War II, there were hundreds of thousands of Jews who were displaced persons, homeless. They wanted a place they could call their own. And their thoughts turned to their land of origin, to the land of Palestine. And if it was necessary, in order to establish themselves there, to move out other people and to push them out, so be it. That's the breaks. Happened to them in the first place. In any case, they said to us, we have earned the right to live there. We have fought wars to conquer that land. In 1948, we established ourselves there by the force of arms. We shed blood on that land. And then in 1957, the Suez Canal crisis and the war that accompanied it. But more significantly, in 1967, the Six-Day War, and then in 1973, the Yom Kippur War. So we belong there. This is, as they say themselves, this is Jew land, and we're not going to give it to anyone else. What about the Palestinian Arab viewpoint? This is how it would go. We Arabs are also children of Abraham. In fact, we are descendants of Abraham's eldest son, Ishmael. So the land was also promised to us. In fact, God gives it to us in our own Holy Scriptures. We've always been here. You Jews really never possessed the land. Soon after Abraham, you were gone. You went to Egypt. And when you returned 400 years later, you fought for the land, true, but yet you never possessed the entire land. We were still here. And eventually, the Babylonians came, following the Assyrians. And they controlled the land. They controlled you. In fact, the Assyrians took the 10 tribes away and they never returned. The Babylonians made a no man's land of the whole area. And then the Persians came, and the Greeks came, and the Romans came, and finally the Romans resolved the whole thing. And since that time, we've been there. We're the Canaanites. We've been the steady occupancy of that land. For 19 centuries, it's been our land. And much more before those 19 centuries. We built the cities and the villages. We turned this land into a garden. We were happy here. We minded our own business. And the 5% Jewish minority population that was here prior to the establishment of the State of Israel, they were happy. They were doing well and they were prosperous. We got along fine. Then all of a sudden, because of what was going on in Europe, all those Jews descend upon us. And they take our land away from us. And since 1948, we have become either a people of refugees or a people under foreign occupation. We want our homes, we want our fields, we want our gardens, we want to be our own masters, we want to govern ourselves, we love our land and we love our freedom. So what do? Well, you turn to what Christians say about the matter. We've seen what Jews say, what the Arabs say. What about Christians? What do they say? Well, if you listen to TV evangelists and radio messages on the subject, you know they say plenty. But there is little agreement, because anybody can go to the Bible, pick a couple verses here and there, and make the Bible say what they want, which often is nothing more than human speculations. In fact, among Christians, there are many viewpoints, and I'd like to quickly describe a couple of extreme viewpoints on these subjects. Extreme not because they're so odd, but extreme in that they are opposite viewpoints. One of them is called dispensationalism. It's a kind of a theory about the Jewish question that was created in the middle of the 19th century. And through Bible notes in what is called the Scofield Study Bible, it rapidly spread out among some segments of Protestant Christians. Now, at the core of dispensational teaching, there is the concept that God's primary program in this world, since He called Abraham and made a covenant with him, that God's primary program concerns the nation of Israel. Eventually, God sent the Messiah to Israel. And Israel rejected the Messiah. But God did not reject His people. God instead, at that point, suspended His program with Israel and started a parenthetical, a provisional program with the church, with the Gentiles. But eventually when he will be, the program with the church is only a kind of a side issue. It's an afterthought, if you wish. God changing gears and saying, okay, this doesn't work. We're going to rest for a while. We're going to put this program on the back burner, the Jewish program. We're going to do something for the Gentiles. And there later we'll come back to the Jews. So he opened a program with the church, but that's only for a while. Eventually, when he will be finished with that, he will close the parenthesis. This is called the parenthesis doctrine of the church. He will close the parenthesis. The church will be, the term they use is raptured, will be kind of spirited away. The Gentile church will be taken away. And God is going to resume at that point his program with the Jews, which is his main program, through a time of tribulation, and then the establishment of a universal Jewish kingdom with capital in Jerusalem, from where Jesus is going to rule over the whole world. In other words, here, you see the edge of this pulpit. This is a timeline. Okay, the call of Abraham is right here. The cross of Jesus is right here. Okay, and at that point, God suspends the Jewish program. He opens a parenthesis here between my two fingers. He opens a parenthesis for the church. But when the church program will be finished, then the church is taken away and the Jewish program resumes all over again, this time with the Jews recognizing the messiahship of Jesus. Okay, that's one viewpoint. And some people who preach that kind of doctrine insist that even in heaven, God is going to have two distinct peoples. There's going to be the church, and then there's going to be the nation of Israel. Now, there is, at the other extreme, there is a viewpoint which is entirely different. It's called covenant theology. And according to covenant theology, God has also two programs. But the real thing is not Israel. The real thing is the church. Israel was a kind of a preparation, and then after the rejection of Christ, God opens up the program to the Gentiles. If you wish here a little bit of visual aids, see, we come prepared, don't we? Here are two lines. From the way you're looking at it, here is Israel. And it eventually, Israel narrows down to Jesus Christ. And when that doesn't work, God turns to the Gentile, and as you see, he has an expanding program of outreach among the Gentiles. What is the relevance of Israel in that kind of a scheme? The present relevance of Israel, none. God is working essentially with the church. That's even more confusing. You know, that's what we're doing. We're getting more and more confused tonight. You thought you were going to get some light on the subject. Look what's happened to us. Well, I suggest that we look at what the Bible teaches. From the perspective of a holistic approach to the Bible based on the tools that we, as a new community, have acquired this past summer. Remember, we did 3 sessions this past summer on how to approach the Bible, how to study the Bible, how to understand the Bible. We should have a little quiz here. and see if anything has stuck to the walls of our minds, or if you're just as knowledgeable as my students, perhaps. What were those principles of interpretation? Well, the first one was the principle of thematic interpretation. One book at a time, one theme at a time. You don't jump from book to book and pick little verses here and there and try to make the Bible say what it doesn't say holistically. The second principle was recognition of the difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Old Testament being preparation, the New Testament fulfillment, and therefore the New Testament being the final word. And the third principle is the principle that was referred to very briefly by Pastor Hybels last Wednesday when he mentioned the hapax principle. You never establish a whole doctrine on a statement that appears only once, especially when it is not clear or when it is contested. So with some of those tools in the back of our minds, let's turn first to the book of Genesis and see what it says, what it says about the people of Israel. We're going to first talk about the call by God of Abraham. Abraham was just like Harry or Joe Blow, minding his own business. And suddenly, out of nowhere, God chooses him, calls him into his service. Chapter 12 of Genesis, first book of the Bible, verses 1 to 3, where God makes a triple promise to Abraham. He says, I will bless you. And immediately that sounds strange. Why should God pick one individual and play favorites with him and say, hey, Abraham, I'm going to bless you. Hey, what about the other people in the world? I'm no better than they. What's going on here? But God says, oh, wait. And I'm going to make of you a great nation. Promises him a national blessing. See, he selects Abraham and blesses Abraham because not as an end in itself, but as a means to an end to bring about a great nation. But again, you say, well, why bless one nation? Why pick one nation among others? Is God still playing favorites? Is God racist? But then you keep on reading and look at verse 3. And God says, by you, all the families of the earth will bless themselves. Now we understand the choice of Abraham and the choice of the nation are not ends in themselves, but they're means to bring about a universal blessing. From Abraham, it's supposed to spread to the nation. From the nation, it's supposed to spread to all the families of the earth. So Abraham and the choice of the nation are a means of universal outreach among all the peoples. They're how the church is going to come about. See? All families of the earth. Now look at the covenant which is being made with Abraham as it is recounted in chapter 17 of Genesis. You have it? Chapter 17, at the top of the chapter. When Abraham was 99 years old, this guy is even older than Dr. B. Although some people would say that's debatable. God appeared to him and commended him. And he said to Abraham, I will make my covenant with you. I'm going to make a deal with you. I'm going to make an agreement which is inviolable, which cannot be retracted. I'm going to make a covenant with you. I'm going to multiply you exceedingly. Then Abram, notice the name here, all along it's been Abram, not Abraham, worshipped, and God said to him, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be the father of a multitude of nations. A multitude of nations, not just one. But Abraham is going to be the originator of a universal community. As a result, verse 5, no longer shall your name be Abram, which means father of a tribe, father of a people, of one nation. That's not true anymore. But your name will be Abraham, which means the father of a multitude of peoples. See? The very name Abraham signifies here that he has a worldwide, universal mission, which is not limited to only one people, but to all the peoples of the earth. Verse 7, and this covenant that I make with you and your descendants, all the descendants, that's the multitude of nations, the church, will be an everlasting covenant that will never be rescinded. And as incidentally, look at verse 8, and I will give to you and to your descendants after you the land of Canaan. Who are the descendants of Abraham? The multitude of nations. So there is this kind of a theme developed in the book of Genesis. We've been dealing now with Romans for a while, and we have touched on the same theme really in Romans. Let's survey it very quickly. Let's run it through in Romans. So now I suggest that we go to Romans, and there we try to define who are the descendants of Abraham according to Romans. The descendants of Abraham according to Romans. Okay, there is a mention of Abraham in chapter 2. Well, all over, but we're going to pick out some references here. Chapter 2, verses 10 and 11. There will be tribulation, distress for every human being who does evil, the Jew first, and also the Greek, the Jew historically, because Revelation first came to the Jew, and then it spread to the Gentile. So to the Jew first, and then to the Gentiles. Greek means Gentiles in the New Testament. But glory and honor and peace for everyone who does good, the Jew first, and also to the Greek, for God shows no partiality. God shows no partiality. There is no prejudice. God is not a racist. Chapter 2, verses 28 to 20 and 29. Definition of a real Jew. See that? It says he's not a real Jew who is one physically, but he's a real Jew who is one inwardly, spiritually. So the biblical definition at this point of a Jew is not ethnic or racial, but spiritual. One is a descendant of Abraham if one has the same faith as Abraham, regardless of what nationality he or she may be. Chapter 3, verse 22, again, the righteousness of God through faith in Jesus Christ for all who believe, regardless of their racial background, for there is no distinction.
This is the end of Side 1. There's no need to fast forward. Please turn to Side 2 now.
God doesn't make any distinctions. God, chapter 4, verse 11, talking of Abraham. There's a development here which is summarized in verse 11. The purpose was to make Abraham, Abraham the father of all who believe. Of all who believe. Again, there is no distinction. There is no partiality with God. Again, chapter 4, verses 16 and 17. Another little summary. The promise of God that was given to Abraham is for whom now? All those who share the faith of Abraham, for he is the father of us all. Because God said, verse 17, I have made you, Abraham, the father of many nations. Those who have the same kind of faith and trust in God as Abraham has are his descendants, whether they are Gentiles or Jews. And skip to chapter 9. The same theme is continued in chapter 9. We saw that only recently. Verses 6 through 8. Not all who are descended from Israel belong to Israel. some who are Jews by race are not really children of Abraham from a New Testament perspective. And not all are children, not all Jews are children of Abraham just because they are his descendants. Look at verse 8. It is not the children of the flesh, physical descendancy, who are the children of God, but children of the promise. See? Who are of the faith, who are the real descendants of Abraham. Chapter 10, verses 11 and 12. There is no distinction between Jew and Greek. If there was in the Old Covenant period, there is none now. The same Lord is Lord of all and bestows his riches upon all who call upon him. And God doesn't ask them what is their racial background. For everyone, again, everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. And finally, chapter 11, verses 25, 26. A hardening has come upon only part of Israel. There is a saved part of Israel. In fact, there are many people here of Jewish background. I know some of them. So only a part of Israel is hardened and excluded, but there are some saved Jews, and there is the full number of the Gentiles who is coming in, and in this manner, all Israel is saved. There is a continuous stream of Jews within the Gentile church, and all the descendants by faith of Abraham are included. In other words, what he's saying here in Romans, he's saying salvation is not on the basis of race, but of grace. See? Not on the basis of race, but of grace. Who are the children of Abraham? They are the believing Jews and the believing Gentiles. They are Abe's babes. So we live in that part of the economy of God where God is concerned with faith rather than racial distinctions. Okay, that still doesn't tell us on whose side God is in the present conflict in the Middle East. Okay, let's see what the Bible says about the land. Well, we know what the Old Testament says. A lot of turmoil back and forth during the Old Testament period. What does the New Testament say? A very interesting development in the New Testament. It begins with Hebrews. There's a theme that runs from Hebrews to the book of Revelation. So now we're talking not about the definition of Israel, but we're talking about the land. Okay? So we turn to Hebrews, the great chapter on faith, chapter 11. Now this is going to come to you as a real surprise to many of you. Chapter 11. Again Abraham. Why is he so important? Because he's the father of us all. Verse 8. By faith, see, faith, that was the distinctive characteristic of Abraham, which is to be found in all his true descendants. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place which he was to receive as an inheritance, that place, as an inheritance, promised to him, the land of promise, the land of Canaan, the land of Palestine as it is called. He went out. But by faith, verse 9, he sojourned, he stayed in the land of promise as in a foreign land, living in tents. And Isaac and Jacob, his son and his grandchild, did the same thing, even though they were heirs of the same promise. They lived as nomads. They never built a house. They never built a shack. They never made a claim for the land. They lived in it as a foreign land. Now that's a strange behavior when the land has been promised to them. Why didn't they take it? Explanation in verse 10. Because Abraham was looking forward to the city which has real foundations, whose builder and maker is God himself. In other words, the land was not the final thing, the final promise of God for Abraham. There was something else. There was a city on the horizon, which is a very special city which God himself has built. What does that mean? Look at verse 13. These all, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, died in faith, and yet they never received what was promised. They didn't take the land. But what was promised, what was really promised through the land, they saw it from far away, and they said hello to it from afar, having acknowledged that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. They're walking in the land that has been promised to them, and they are strangers in it, and they are exiles in it. They are refugees. They are displaced persons. They don't take the place as theirs. Why again? Because verse 14, people who speak thus make it clear that they are seeking a homeland. They were in the promised land, but they're seeking a homeland. Verse 16, they desire a better country, that is to say, and here's the big word, a heavenly one. A heavenly one. Therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared to them a city. Again, you see, the land is not the real thing, but the city, the heavenly city, of which the land is only an image. The heavenly city is the destination and the fulfillment that they are seeking. Does that make things clear? No. What's the city? What's this heavenly city, of which the land was only a passing image? Okay, turn to chapter 12. There's a reference to the city again, chapter 12, verses 22 to 24. You, he says, you Christians, you the true descendants of Abraham, Jews and Gentile believers, you have come to Mount Zion. Where is Mount Zion? Jerusalem. To the city of the living God, but here he's not talking about an earthly city, because he says, you have come to the heavenly Jerusalem, where the angels are, where God is, where Christ is. That's your real home. That's your real destination. That's where you belong, in the heavenly Jerusalem. Chapter 13 of Hebrews, verse 14. The theme is followed through very carefully. In verse 14, here we Christians have no lasting city. It's not the land that's important. It's not a city upon the land. But we seek the city which is to come. It's on the horizon. It's over there. It's the heavenly city. And if you wonder what that city is, turn to the book of Revelation, chapter 21. Way at the end of your Bible. See, we covered the whole Bible in 40 minutes. Boy, we're doing well, aren't we, in New Community? Chapter 21, the top of the chapter, the seer, prophet, says this: I saw a new heaven and new earth. Everything is past. No more Barrington, no more Chicago, no more Palestine. No more Jerusalem. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. There is nothing anymore. There is only one thing left. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming out down from heaven from God. See? This is the making of God. God is the builder. This city is real. God's real foundation. It's unshakable. It's a spiritual reality. It comes down from heaven from God. Verse 2, it is prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. Did you get that? The bride? What's the bride in the teachings of Jesus and in the New Testament? Verse 9, the angel comes and tells John, "Come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb." What is the bride, the wife of the Lamb in the New Testament, friends? Say it louder. The church. The church, see? The community which God started with Abraham. That universal community. "I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb." And he carried me to a high mountain and showed me what? The holy city, Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God with the glory of God. And then there is a highly symbolic description of the city. 12 gates, 12 apostles, and the 12 tribes of Israel, and the 12 foundations, the 12 apostles. Beautiful picture of the Old Covenant people, believers, the New Covenant people, believers, together, being the bride. So what was Abraham looking for when he was on that land that he did not possess? Because he realized the land was only an image of a spiritual reality that was in the making, and that God would bring to fulfillment eventually, and of which he would be a part as well as all the believers, his descendants. See? That land was an image of the church. The holy city Jerusalem, which is God's making, and which is the only thing that will remain when everything is said and done and when everything is gone. Because the church has an eternal destiny. So let's draw some lessons on this. First lesson. Does God say take sides? God is a God of love and self-sacrifice, who hates violence and oppression. God is not interested in real estate, in the conquest of real estates, in wars of conquest. Psalm 147 says that God's delight is not in the strength of the horse, rockets and tanks. He takes no pleasure in the legs of a man, in the efficiency of soldiers, but he takes pleasure in those who fear him and who depend on his love. God hates strife. He loves righteousness, peace, justice. Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers." They're the only ones called the children of God, the peacemakers. Violence, when it is responded to with retaliation, rebounds endlessly. Jesus showed us how to absorb violence, to let it die. Christians today should rejoice, not in violence of either side, not in oppression, repression, but they should be on the side of negotiation, compromise, mutual respect. God is on their side when that happens. Second lesson. Do we Christians take sides? We are well qualified in this church to believe that everybody matters to God. There is no no-count person. The Jew matters to God. The Palestinian matters to God. I wish everybody could do in the world the way we do it here at Willow Creek Community Church, where there is a variety of minorities represented. There are Jews, there may well be some Arabs, in fact I know some here in this body. There are blacks, there are Asians, there are racially mixed couples, but that kind of a mix is irrelevant. Because we know Galatians 3:28, one of the central verses of the New Testament, that now there is no Jew, there is no Greek, there is no slave, there is no free, there is no male, there is no female. Those differences are irrelevant because we are all one in Christ Jesus, in this body which is eventually going to become the New Jerusalem in heaven. Friends, the unity that we possess is something very rare, very precious, to be enjoyed, to be cherished, to be protected, and to become a model for a way of reconciliation in the world in those places where there is strife. Third lesson. I think we have to learn to beware of using the Bible as a crystal ball, as a fortune teller's manual to predict God's future program for him. God doesn't need that. He knows what He's going to do. Every generation of Christians has had its stargazers and its prophets who have called together verses from the Bible to predict the signs of the time and the nearness of the end. And they have been repeatedly proven wrong. Jesus said, no one knows about the end. The angels don't know. Even the Son of Man doesn't know Himself. He relinquished that area of the future entirely to the Father. He's the only one who knows. It's not for you to know the times and the seasons, He says. But what you have to do is be ready, be at work, be occupied, and be in prayer, be in worship, so that the end doesn't surprise you. It could be in 10 million years, it could be the next moment. But it's wrong to try to predict the time. It's a sin. And finally, in this very superficial study, we have had a glimpse of the church in heaven. The church is not an afterthought. It's not a sidetrack of God. It's what He is doing from eternity to eternity. It is the very purpose of creation. When Adam and Eve were established in the Garden of Eden, they were a church. When Abraham was called, it was to try to redeem that community that had been lost in the Garden of Eden and to establish a new people. And we are in that stream of eternity that will open up in heaven, in the very presence of God. God poured all He had in creation and then in redemption in the person of Jesus Christ for the church. And it is for us to cherish also the church, to protect her, to nurture, to defend her, to serve her, like next weekend where there are 400 people needed. Sounds incredible, but I think we can do it. And above all, to enjoy the goodness and the fellowship of the church as an earthly preview of the heavenly city, the New Jerusalem. Let's pray.